And aloha to everybody joining us this morning. It's so good to be with each and all of you as we try to help our small businesses throughout Hawaii in a very difficult time. As you can tell, I'm not in my Washington, D.C. Uniform, and this is my downtown Honolulu office, so I'm looking out over the grounds of Iolani Palace and feeling at home. But obviously, this is serious Washington, D.C. congressional stuff. It was just about 1 year ago, hard to believe, only 1 year ago, that I think I had my first congressional briefing on this virus coming out of China. I think it was in middle to late January. It's the first time that in Congress it really rose to the level of a formal congressional briefing that maybe this was something we should all be concerned about. And of course, it's been a tremendously difficult year for each and all of us throughout the last 12 now months. We have had the public health crisis of COVID-19. We've had the economic crisis, and we've had the social and community and family and neighborhood crisis. And that is all continuing as part of the COVID-19 crisis. It is my top priority in the 117th Congress that just started a few weeks ago, that stretches out for 2 years. I think this is going to be with us for 2 years. Hopefully we can make some good solid headway against it, but clearly it's not something that's going to go away next month or even the month or even a year beyond that. And so what we can do now is to just continue to work at the federal and congressional level to try to help out as much as we can with those kind of three buckets of the crisis, if I can put it that way. And today we're focusing on the economic side of it here in Hawaii, where, as we all know, although we've had one of the best public health results in the country, we've had one of the worst economic results. We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the entire country. We have, with travel and tourism, basically going down to 90%. Year on year, we have had tremendous economic dislocation, which has translated out beyond travel and tourism. And as you all know painfully, in Hawaii, small business is king, and so you have been affected. And so one of my top priorities over the last year has been, how can we help Hawaii small businesses? The CARES Act that we passed back in March of last year, which was a $2+ trillion emergency assistance package, I had a whole bunch of buckets in it: state and local government funding, health care assistance, direct stimulus payments, federal unemployment benefit supplementation. And then, as you all know, we had a major component of that, which was designed to help our nation's small businesses through a very, very difficult time. That occurred in the shape of hundreds of millions of dollars of funding to existing small business programs and also to new small business programs, the Paycheck Protection Act being the #1 program that was utilized by many. At the end of the day, in Hawaii, we saw somewhere in the range of $2.5 billion of loans, much of it forgiven and much of it still to be forgiven. To our Hawaii small businesses. The final figure was somewhere in the range of 25,000 small businesses assisted, and then significant amounts also from the EIDL program as well, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, comparable amounts in comparable businesses. So many businesses were helped. That's the good news. The bad news is the crisis was far worse than the resources available. Many businesses took out the first draw right away and utilized that money already, and we're still in the crisis. And some businesses were not able to gain PPP loans for whatever reason. We just passed in Congress, as I think everybody knows, in December, after many, many months of, in my view, tragic negotiation that delayed assistance getting out there. A second large emergency assistance package. This one is at $900 billion, including somewhere close to $300 billion allocated to our small businesses. Again, about $275 billion to additional PPP loans, and then other programs that we will discuss throughout this seminar. The purpose of this call today is to be sure that our Hawaii small businesses know what the opportunities are, that you have opportunities to ask questions. I've got a panel of true experts, the folks that are on the ground helping you to give you their perspectives and a summary of what these programs are all about and how to go about getting those programs. I do want to say that this is in the big picture, one of other efforts, one of many efforts that we are pursuing from a small business perspective. Of course, we have ongoing federal small business programs that even in the best of times are very highly utilized here in Hawaii through small business advice, federal government small business preferences, which in my mind are not fully utilized here in Hawaii for a variety of reasons. And then we have a very immediate issue impacting all of you, which is that the state has borrowed a great deal of money from the federal government to pay out unemployment benefits. And if that money is not, if that money is due back to the federal government in that amount on that time frame, it will accelerate an increase in unemployment rates, which will be counterproductive to small business recovery. And so we're trying to work to see whether the federal government in the next emergency assistance packages will extend those loans out or forgive them to some extent, or at least forgive the interest and reduce that risk and burden from state unemployment tax increases. So that's kind of a big picture of what we're up to today, what I hope we will accomplish today. I am joined by many, many members of my staff who are available to help you. You can see some of them on the screen. I've got Kimberly Ryan in my Honolulu office here. Mitch Heidenreich is in my District of Columbia, DC office. Many of you worked with him on small business issues. Let's see, Wisdom Matsuzaki is on the phone and she's in my DC office, and I think I missed something. Chad Wolke is here as well in my Honolulu office. Here's the bottom line. We are here to help you with your questions. We helped literally thousands of people in the last year with various COVID-19 related issues, including many, many small businesses who had issues with the SBA or whatever the question might be. The easiest way for you to ask for clarification on your questions or for assistance is to go to case.house.gov, case.house.gov. That is the entree to my congressional office. It has information on COVID-19. It has information on the small business programs and the other federal laws and assistance that we've passed. And it has how to contact us. So if you will use that, that will be the quickest way to get in. Just a couple of housekeeping matters. We will have time for questions. If you have a question and would like to ask it right now, well, we've got everybody here. Please do that. Use the chat function down below, and we will be watching that and read your question back. Or if we get to the if we get down the road and it looks manageable, we'll just go ahead and unmute and you can ask it directly, as long as we don't have too many people doing it at once. But it looks like we have a good solid group that we might be able to just do that. And then if you have questions that you don't want to ask live, please contact me directly. So bottom line, we're here to help you. We want to get these programs out as fast as possible, as broadly as possible. They're tricky in some ways. There are rules that were changed from the first time around to improve it, to narrow it, to clarify that it was for folks that really needed it. And we also are relying upon many of our partners in the private sector, in particular our small business qualified lenders, our banks and credit unions and other institutions in Hawaii, who for at least the PPP program are the entree to getting these loans, and they're already working on it. They're on the phone as well, so they will be listening in, and perhaps we can ask them to chime in. With that, I am going to, I've said enough other than for whatever questions you have for me, and I want to get to the folks that are actually important on this call. I'm going to introduce all three of you right up front, and then I'll just turn it over to you. First up, we've got Thornton Mark Spain. He is the brand new permanent district director of the small business administration's Hawaii Pacific Islands District Office. So he is the district director. And that office actually covers not just Hawaii, but many of the territories in the Pacific. So he's got a pretty broad jurisdiction. Mark is a Marine. I worked Vietnam, a proud Vietnam veteran, very active in the Vietnam veterans concerns. He has also worked for 50 plus years in banking and financial services and consulting work, particularly within the U.S. Marine Corps and Marines. He started with the SBA in 2012. He was the deputy district director until just last week, his position was made permanent. So we're very happy about that. Kathy Wiltsey is the state director and director of the lead center of the Hawaii Small Business Development Centers. That is focused on exactly what it sounds like, to provide assistance to our small businesses throughout Hawaii. They work very, very closely with the SBA and their other partners in doing so. Kathy has a long history in including being a small business owner. She previously served in auditor positions on the mainland and ran the Virginia SBDC at George Mason University. So we're really happy to have her. And then finally, Dana Hanaunio, who is the director of the Minority Business Development Center here in Honolulu at the University of Hawaii. The MBDA is the federal agency that is responsible for assuring that minority businesses have adequate resources and are represented within, especially our federal contracting, but not exclusively. She has a very long history, similarly in business and banking, worked in Native Hawaiian financial issues with the U.S. Administration for Native Americans and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. And she is really, really good, as all of three of them are, just in the basics of small business, personal experience in small business, and with consulting. They all work together. They all have kind of their kuleana, but they all work together to help you out. And obviously, many of you qualify in several different areas for assistance from them. With that, I think, Mark, I will turn it over to you. And if you could just please outline what the programs are that you're responsible for administering, especially out of the current 900 million. I think most of the folks on the phone are particularly focused on the new PPP or the supplemental PPP, how that works. But whatever you think is important, why don't you go for it for a few minutes, and then we'll move on to your partners, and then we'll get to questions.
Thank you, Congressman Case. Good morning, all. It is definitely a highlight for me to be able to address this audience as the new district director. I think the most important thing is that our office now, with my appointment, we have a strong team, and I will elaborate on the team members in the Q&A session, so it's pertinent maybe to a question. But most importantly, we have three distinct areas. We have access to capital. We also have counseling services, largely with our resource partners, two of which, of course, a Congressman Case has introduced, and then also contracting. So we have three team leads that focus on these three areas, but on the PPP loan origination processing, very candidly, today, the lenders are on a new portal. That portal at this point is going to require some additional due diligence because of congressional oversight, and rightfully so, on how the loans are originated. So we do know that the loans that were originated in PPP 1, Draw 1, were quickly done in many cases, thanks to over 5,400 lenders nationwide and all of our lenders participating here. I think the most important thing is that the lenders, having been briefed on what the PPP round 2 will look like, will probably see a longer period of time for the loan to be originated, Congressman Case. And we can explain that in the following workshops and webinars that we will be preparing and using with not only our resource partners. We have a partnership meeting later today on how we can roll out this information so that our borrowers can be prepared to apply for their PPP round 2 in the most efficient way possible. So those webinars are organized under the team lead of Mary Dale, a long-term agency representative here in Hawai'i. And Mary, of course, is well known to our resource partners and also very well known to our community organizations, particularly non-government organizations around the state. I think the thing that's probably next important is this. We recognize that access to capital, with the damage that's been done to our local businesses, particularly in tourism and hospitality. I'll be working personally with Capital Scan, that is a group here in Hawaii that has not worked with the SBA before, to see how we can be innovative, adaptive, and overcome some of the obstacles that affect access to capital for our businesses, Congressman Case. And I think the most important thing right now is for all of the listeners on this broadcast recognize that we are here to serve, and we are going to be a more robust outreach and marketing presence in the community, working with Dana Ho'unio and Kathy Wiltsey in a more aggressive way than we have in the past. The customers demand it. And in many cases, I can speak for myself, we don't stop at the end of the workday. I was even returning calls on Saturday and Sunday to make sure that the backlog of calls would not occur, so that we could make sure that the answers needed, whether it be a Paula Akana on the Iolani Palace or a customer in Hilo. We have to make sure that when they call. So that being said, I want to give the listeners my email address. As you did, Congressman Case, it's not as simple. I have to use my first name, which can be a tongue twister, but the email address for you to send to me is follows. Thornton is spelled Thornton, like thorn and ton in one word, dot, Spain, like the country is spelled, at sba.gov. Thornton.spain@sba.gov. That way I can receive your email, and the next email that's important for outreach and dealing with PPP specifically, I will give you that email as well. That is mary.dale, D-A-L-E, @sba.gov. For anything to do with contracting, anything to do with federal contracting and access to that arena, Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L .youth, Y-O-U-T-H, @sba.gov. Those are my team leadership personnel, and that's why today, as we get ready to assist in the PPP round 2, everyone is going to be carrying the load of making sure we communicate, Congressman Case, to everyone that inquires. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
Mark, before we go on, can you describe quickly the PPP program, just the generalities of the PPP, because that was the most popular and got the most utilization really the first time around. So just quickly clarify, folks that got the PPP last time around, that they can apply for a second round under conditions. Not everybody, but some people. And then the second round is available as well.
Right. I will definitely do that. And Congressman Case, I will also provide to you the actual slide deck so that you can share with constituents at large now that we have a very open and discuss. So I want to give you the highlights here from the actual slide deck. PPP origination process that's going to be effective today. When a lender first submits an origination application, either the forms that are used, into the platform, SBA runs the application data through a validation process. That's step 1. The validation process may return messages that require input from the lender. You see previously, pausing here for a moment, the validation process was done during the forgiveness process. Now it's been moved to the front end of round 2 because of criticism that loans in round 1 were originated too quickly in some cases. So just to know that the validation process, we call it compliance underwriting, will be added to the application process. It will extend the time for approval, but it means it will be done without any delay when the forgiveness process occurs. PPP loan will not receive a loan number, that is, the banker will not receive a loan number until the validation messages have been cleared. And these validation messages, Congressman, are called hold codes. And they are a type of a message that says, if you want this loan application to process, here is the solution we need. Here's how you can correct the problem and the documentation required. So the PPP loan origination processing, once this starts, and it will be starting today, is going to require a little bit more time for approval, but it's going to be a more, what shall we say, efficient process overall, and we will not see fraud or abuse occur. So that's the PPP round 2 in a nutshell, but I would be more than happy after this call to give you the full PowerPoint presentation that provides in-depth detail for your staff.
Appreciate that. We'll try to get it out to everybody on the call. Bottom line, PPP, if you applied for and received the PPP loan the first time around, most businesses are going to be eligible to come in for a second round of PPP. The basic rules are, as I recall, I'm going to just check my notes here, 300 or fewer employees and a demonstrated 25% reduction at least in gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. So the ability to get a second round of PPP is not at the same extent as the first round. And the reason is pretty simple from a policy perspective. We just, at the end of the day, there was less money in PPP than the first time around. I could go into the political gymnastics of why that occurred. I did not support that. I felt that more assistance was needed, but that's what passed Congress and was signed by the previous president. And so as a result, the money is far more tailored to small businesses as well as to demonstrated need. There is also the ability of folks that did not get a PPP the first time around to get a first round PPP, which has slightly different eligibility requirements. So what Mark is describing now is how you go about submitting your loan application. But the bottom line here is that small businesses should check out PPP, even if you did get a PPP the first time around. Okay, let's go on then to Kathy Wiltsey. Go ahead, Kathy. What do you got, and what do you want people to know?
The main thing I want people to know is that the Small Business Development Center has offices on each of the major Hawaiian islands. We have on Hawaii Island an office in Hilo and one in Kona. We have an office in Oahu, on Kauai, and also on Maui. So what we do is we are actually helping small businesses who inquire on a one-on-one basis to assist them through the various processes. So what that means basically is if you call us, well, we also are doing separate webinars, kind of with a little bit different bent than the SBA sponsored webinars, although we'll be participating in those as well for support. But we actually do a lot more hands-on counseling with the individual businesses. So if perhaps a business in the last round had difficulty determining how to qualify, we can assist in helping them to get their paperwork together, make the numbers, appropriate. We get them basically preparing the application before they actually go online. And that had been a big help to people the last time, particularly when they couldn't find things, find out how to do it, and were very intimidated by it. We deal with any small business and actually more recently, even nonprofits and some other areas as it relates to the PPP and EIDL loans. Last year, for example, we worked with 350, we assisted in getting businesses in Hawaii 357 loans. And the amount of that was over 32,372,000. So considering, we're a program and it's all one-on-one assistance, the numbers pale a little bit or a lot compared to what everyone got, but we are dealing with more of the smaller end small businesses, the people who really needed help. They don't have accountants and staff to do that paperwork for them. So we kind of became their assistants in being able to process their applications.
Now, Kathy,
so we're pretty proud of what we.
What?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask you for clarification, just because sometimes people get confused as between SBA itself, the Small Business Administration, and the development centers. So what is your relationship with SBA? And related to that, does it cost people anything to ask for your advice?
Okay. The simple response and the one that's probably most important to people is that we are a no-cost service. So please, if you have questions, call and have one of our counselors assist you. As it relates to the relationship between us and SBA, we are, and Mark even referred to us in his counseling, primarily the counseling under the SBA umbrella comes from the resource partners that SBA funds. So the Small Business Development Centers, or we call it the SBDC, is one of the resource partners and probably the largest in our locality in Hawaii. As a result, we follow the direction of SBA when it comes to the official rulings and all of that kind of stuff. But as I said, we're available to help more of the small businesses who may need some assistance.
Okay, and is there a central website that people can go to get to the Hawaii SBDC?
Yes, it's www.hisbdc.org.
Okay, great. This is
and on that you'll see.
Go ahead.
On that you'll see our locations, and so you can choose which island you're on, and get to the appropriate people. Although we, and especially now in these times, most of our consulting is done via webinar and remotely. So phone calls, emails, and webinars, but all of that free of charge. And if you go through that website, you will certainly, it'll lead you through. You make a request for counseling.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. This, the Small Business Administration is the umbrella administration, or I guess I would say, for federal small business assistance. But as Dana and Kathy illustrate, we do have small business, we do have development centers that are specific to provide specific counseling in specific areas. We've talked about SBDC. Dana will talk about the minority businesses. We have veteran-owned women, veteran business partners, women business partners. So they're not on this call, but they're nonetheless out there available. And this is your federal government basically saying, look, we're setting the programs up, but also programs don't work unless people don't know how to use them. So the center partners are federally funded and available for your use. And frankly, I think they're too often an untapped secret. Some people know about them very, very well, but many people don't know that they're available for free. And so we're trying to get the word out that, you know, when you're dealing with, you know, the PPP and some of the intricacies and how to apply, you don't have to, you know, go straight to Mark, although he welcomes it at the SBA. You don't have to come to us, although we're happy to help. You can go straight to these development centers. Dana, over to you. I hope that was a good enough introduction to your kuleana.
Representative Case, can I?
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Excuse me. I just saw a chat that I forgot to give my personal email.
Okay.
And it is my name with a dot between them, no spaces, at hisbdc.org.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your service. So what, Dana, what qualifies as a minority business? Who can come to you for comparable help, and what is your advice in terms of navigating federal COVID-19 assistance for everybody?
Aloha, everybody. First, thank you for having me on here to participate in the Forum for Small Businesses. So real quickly, aloha, my name is Dana Hawai'i. I'm actually part of the University of Hawaii. And the University of Hawaii has a cooperative agreement with the Department of Commerce to run the MBDA Business Center here. I'm housed at the Scheidler campus, or Scheidler College in Manoa. And long story short is we do a three-pronged approach here. We help MBEs, minority business-owned companies, do three things. Get access to contracts, get access to capital, and get access to resources and networks. So long story short is we are here to assist minority businesses. I will be clear, pre-COVID, MBDA, which is out of the Department of Commerce, had a mandate that we looked at companies that grossed $1 million minimum. We had an OMB come out, and MBDA has indicated to us, so there's a little bit of a change. As of April 1st, we now assist all small businesses and minority-based, minority-owned businesses as well. So to answer Congressman Case, an MBE is a company that is at least 51% owned by a minority. As of April 1st, we now assist all small businesses regardless of the $1 million gross requirement. And that was because of the CARES Act. More importantly, what we have tried to do is expand our outreach. Prior to pre-COVID, we tended to work on a relationship basis with our clients. We weren't based on volume. So we worked with MBEs long-term. We took care of their response to contracts, the response to lines of credit or loans for the long haul. Now what we also do is we provide venues like this where we will work in volume because we're only based here in Honolulu. And we try to, via the platform, the virtual platform, to do outreach to more small businesses. We are a very small staff. There are 6 of us. We are project managers here, but we're also professors. So we also have MBA students. There's 4 on staff that help us work with small businesses as well as minority-owned companies. So part of my discussion here with the audience is to let them know that we are also here to assist you to navigate the various products that the CARES Act and the Economic Aid Act provides to all small businesses, regardless if you're minority owned or not. We can help you put through applications. We can walk you through the process with regards to, so long story short, there's the PPP, there's the EIDL, there's the SBOG. And sometimes what clients want us to do, or small businesses, minority-owned companies, they want us to kind of walk them through, navigate all of those particular projects. We're not even talking about the debt relief. but kind of navigate the process in terms of which product fits them best based on the requirements of the individual product and the multiplier effect that allows them an eligible amount. So our goal is to help support SBA as well as the SBDC and the Women's Business Center and the PTAX and the VBOX to kind of go through the process of understanding each of the products and find which one matches up best. Because as we all know, some companies cannot apply for all of the products. Sometimes we have to figure out which is the best fit for them. So again, part of what we do is kind of holistic because we look at how to boost them up during this time of COVID, but also how do we make sure that the revenues are still coming in? Do they need help in contracts? Our niche is government procurement. So we have been moving forward on that path to say, if there's a commercial outreach that we can help for your product and service, we can work with that as well. And as Mark has said, we work in partnership with SBA, both Michael Youth and Marydale, to launch these kind of informational webinars so that the small businesses are aware of the services and resources that are available for you. Last point I want to make is, I have said before that we are very small in staff. So what we try to do here is we try to leverage all of our partners. So normally what ends up happening here is that we do an assessment. And I'll be honest, once April 1st hit, the OMB basically told us here at the University of Hawaii that our services are free too. So we can meet with you. We can work through what's going on in your business. And if we know, because we know all of our other partners here in the islands, if we know that there is a specific provider out there and a specific consultant within that provider that can help you, we are more than happy to say, hey, go call Kathy's office, talk to this particular person at SBDC and tell them I sent you, because they can help you with something as simple as the application. Or go to this person other in PTAC because they can help you with the bid match. So we are good again at the three-prong approach. We can help with contracts, we can help with capital, we can help with markets and resources. And that's our program in a nutshell.
Okay, great. And how do people, so the bottom line is, if you are, excuse me, a small business, regardless of whether you're a minority small business or not, people can come to you for assistance, for counseling assistance.
Yes, and we provide one-on-one as well as group. We've done a lot of webinars via group since COVID. The premise is that if we can reach 50 companies within an hour, as opposed to a one-on-one for 2 hours, then we can do that. And my hope is that we provide enough information so that if there is some detailed, deep dive information that you want to have with us, we can do it on a virtual platform as well. But yes, we do initial assessments.
Okay, and maybe we skipped past one question, which I saw pop up here on the chat, which is, let's just go back to the basics. What is a small business by statutory definition? So, you know, we're talking about who can actually come to each and all of you for assistance. And by the way, the question is a little different from general definitions of small business to eligibility for specific programs. There are some eligibility limitations, but just who can come and, you know, talk story with you. I don't know, Mark, do you want to take that? What's the small SBA's classic definition of a small business?
Yes, Congressman, definitely in the traditional sense, it's 500 employees or less. There also are some revenue documents that go into what we call the national or the North American code system. But for the PPP, for this current round, number 2, it's going to be 300 employees or less. So the definition in this legislation that Dana and Kathy have alluded to has that particular feature built in, but traditionally 500 employees or less, Congressman.
Right. So, but from the perspective of folks actually asking for advice, as opposed to whether they're eligible for a second round of PPP, it's 500 or less is the classic federal definition of small business. I'm quite confident that if you are, if you're not sure whether you qualify, and if you call up any of our partners or email Mark, you're still going to get an answer back as to, whether this is an appropriate approach. I don't think we're all going to stand on ceremony too much on that. Probably a business at 20,000 employees would not be the right business to, contact any of folks on small business programs, but the expertise is there to be utilized. Okay, thank you so much to the three of you. I'm going to just go straight into questions and ask for your help as we as needed. So I'm just running the chat right now. Any opportunity to get PPP for 501c7 organizations? They are not, as I recall, eligible now. However, I neglected to say earlier that we are actively in the middle of negotiations right now for a third emergency assistance COVID-19 package, which, as you all know, President Biden has proposed. In Congress, we were working on this before the changeover in terms of our administration. Certainly many of us, myself included, believe in covering all the C organizations. At the beginning, back in the CARES Act, we were omitting some of them. I think C6s were not there initially, and so we have covered many of them now, but not all. So this is unfinished business, and we've got the issue. I am going next one. I'm just going to read it. VA SBA business loans to veterans do not allow loans for passive income rental revenue. Can legislation be introduced to include passive business ventures to qualify for VA SBA business loans? I'm not sure, Banner, whether you're referring to the PPP itself or VA business loans, SBA business loans in general. There are limitations in the PPP loans as to what you can use that money for. And as I recall, Mark, they do not include, they include some of rental revenues, if I'm not mistaken. Do you have insight on that particular question?
Not in particular, but if that individual would send me an email, I'll get the answer specifically from our 7A as well as our PPP desk portals that will give the answer precisely, Congressman.
Okay, thank you very much. Next one is, what are support options for small businesses that are home-based? This was a discussion we had in Congress because there was some lack of clarity at the beginning as to whether you needed a concrete place that you actually called your home away from your home, and there are not, in general, limitations on as I recall. Correct me if I'm wrong. Whether your home is whether your small business is operated out of your home or whether it's operated out of another physical location, you're still eligible for most of these programs. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I'll answer that question. Specifically, it was the city and counties that limited home-based businesses because they wanted a commercial street address. But on the federal level, home-based businesses are not distinguished from a existing commercial or commercial address in a center or a shopping center. But only in the city and county was that that was felt here locally. Speaking for the city and county of Honolulu, that's what we were told, but I don't know if it applied to other counties as well. But at the federal level, no worries.
Correct. And that's an important distinction to make here because I think people do get a little bit confused on this. The federal government in the CARES Act and in the supplemental assistance package that we just passed in December set up these programs and funded these programs from a federal level. So what we're talking about now are federal loans and federal grants. Separate from that, the CARES Act did fund flexible monies to state and county governments. State and county governments had that money. They could apply it to many, many things, including assistance to small businesses, if that's what they chose to do. And here in Hawaii, some of our counties did exactly that. The confusion is that some of the eligibility requirements were different than the federal side. So sometimes people get the state and county government programs mixed up with the federal programs. What we're talking about here are the federal programs. So from that perspective, no significant limitations on home-based versus non-home-based. Let's see, can you briefly explain what you mean by small businesses and who can be categorized as small business? I think we answered that. The classic definition is 500 or less employees. Just wanted to get clarification on first draw PPP loans. Does the simplified application for loans less than 150,000 apply to first draw as well, or just a second draw? I'm down into my level of detail that's not off the top of my head. Dana, just a second draw?
First and second.
First and second, okay. By the way, let me pause for a second to address when Dana talked about the, and we all are a little too used to using acronyms, the SVOG program or the SVOG program. I'm not sure how we've classified it. What she's referring to is the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant Program. This is a specific program set up in the December $900 billion second emergency assistance package that is very, very specific to what we refer to as shuttered venues, which is I think designed primarily to get to entertainment, live entertainment and venues that have been especially hard hit. Now, a lot of people have been especially hard hit. And I could make the argument and did make the argument that there are a lot broader definition of businesses in travel and tourism, for example, restaurants, that needed far more targeted assistance. Again, the practical realities of legislation in Congress, we came out with a shuttered venue operator grant program, which was, I think, appropriate to that particular industry. So we're talking about live venue operators, theatrical producers, live performing arts organizations, relevant museum operators, zoos and aquariums who meet specific criteria. So if you are one of these or might be one of these, there's a whole separate program that you are eligible for, and that's a new program. And so we're going to have to work through kind of making sure that that's implemented. But the main thing to communicate to you right now is if you fit that category, it's not, you should not only be considering PPP and EIDL. There may be better benefits in this particular program.
And I wanted to add on to that, the Shuttered Venues Operating Grant. For those entities that can qualify for the SBOG, please know that part of the requirements to even apply for the SBOG requires you to be registered in sam.gov. So before the application opens for the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant, you have to be registered in the database for the federal government under, again, sam.gov. Now that process can take up to 7 to 10 days. Therefore, we are in our virtual platforms letting everybody know that if you qualify for an SBOG based on the readout of the bill, then you should be working towards getting registered in sam.gov, because only if you are an active entity under sam.gov can you apply for the grant. My readout of the bill is basically because the funds are going to be dispersed off of the EFT information that is included in your sam.gov. Okay. So SBA can talk a little bit more about that. I think there's some information that's going to be coming out very shortly. I don't think the application is going to be out at least this week, but again, mark them.
I'll echo on what Dana just said. It is very important to note that probably the frequently asked questions and the opening of the portal will be the week of February 15. And I do get weekly calls each Monday from Washington. And what I'm doing is, my commitment is to make sure our congressional colleagues know exactly what's happening. And that will be something that will be a very strong feature going forward. Last but not least, if you do utilize an SBOG, you do not have access to a round 2 PPP. It's either or. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Congressman.
Okay, thank you. All right, next I was surprised to see that tour operator travel agencies did not qualify for the 3.5 times salary for the PPP amount. Will this change in the future? I am outside of my weeds on that one. I know Kathy, do you know the answer to that? Well, you don't know the answer to will this change in the future. I would say that will this change in the future? Many of the things we're talking about here may change in the future because we're in the middle of another round of emergency assistance in a new political environment in Hawaii. So it's in DC. So it's possible that many of these conditions may well change as we go through. But as it stands right now, is that.
I was muted, sorry. The guidance comes directly from DC. So as we did in the first, the whole first round of the CARES Act and all of that, there were several clarifications and changes that were administered along the way. So I would suggest to people that they make sure that they pass on their concerns, and there may be a chance to change who's eligible over time as those programs are being reviewed. So, I mean.
I will echo on what Kathy was. Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Sorry, my understanding out of the readout was that the 3.5 multiplier was only applicable for those companies that have a NAICS code that start at 7.2. So for any of you out there, you can check what your NAICS codes is by looking at census.gov. And if you fall within the 72 category, you can be applicable or be eligible for the 3.5 times multiplier.
And what does the census code have to do with that for my own benefit?
Based on the calculation for the PPP, there was a separate itemization for those particular companies. So like hotels and restaurants to get a greater multiplier of 3.5. I think the question was 3.5, right?
Right.
So those companies are applicable for the 3.5 multiplier.
Okay. If there's any questions from that, further follow-up from that question, or you can email any one of us. Next question: have the two stimulus checks, the two tiny stimulus checks, that's an opinion there, thus far actually stimulated Hawaii's economy? When can we expect the third stimulus? Well, I think my answer to your question is yes, the stimulus checks did stimulate Hawaii's economy. I guess we can disagree over to what extent and whether it was the right stimulus. I supported the stimulus checks. I supported a higher amount for the second stimulus checks than actually was enacted. And I think that as I recall, if I recall my numbers correctly, if we got somewhere in Hawaii, somewhere in the range of 10.5, 10.7, 10.8 billion dollars of total assistance from the CARES Act, and still growing a little bit. And of that, $1 billion plus was stimulus checks directly to eligible people in Hawaii. And I think that anytime you put $1 billion into an economy, you're going to have some stimulation to the economy. When can we expect the third stimulus? That's under active negotiation right now. So I think we're going to at least know the answer to that within about 2 to 3 months. And those stimulus checks are going out right now. By the way, so if you received your prior stimulus check, you should be receiving soon, if you haven't already, a second stimulus payment, which comes in the form for a lot of folks of a credit card that gets converted into a deposit into your account. We've had a lot of questions in my office on that. So if you have questions on the stimulus payment, give my office an email. Let's see, contact information for Kathy and Dana. I think you've already put it in the chat room. So please check the chat, and I think I saw both of them put it in. Okay, many business owners in Hawaii have SBA loans, 504 loans, 7A, micros, et cetera, that are intended to help us grow businesses and create jobs. However, loans taken out by businesses pre-COVID have markedly higher interest rates than current rates. Unfortunately, we have been told that SBA will not refinance or lower these interest rates. That's a mistake. Lowering interest rates to today's historically low rates is low-hanging fruit that could easily help small businesses reduce costs. Simply reducing the interest rate businesses are paying on SBA other federal loans is a simple and effective way. It goes on for a while without federal government having to take on additional debt. I think I'll just take this unless Mark, you want to comment. It is correct that many loans were taken out in prior years when interest rates were higher, and prior to COVID, when we weren't in an emergency assistance, mode. And so a macro question, really, not just specific to SBA and small businesses, but really for loans across the board, the same arguments, for example, are being made right now with respect to student loans. Should we reduce them during a COVID-19 perspective, either temporarily or permanently? Of course, many of them are suspended right now, but so it's a larger policy question as to whether we actually should allow for loans to be renegotiated down. That is also in the middle of the emergency assistance and negotiations right now. So we might well see some kind of an adjustment. But I would also note, and I think this is correct, Mark, that it's not free of consequence to the federal budget to reduce the interest rate on those loans. There's an expectation as to what
I
that
will
is.
comment, Congressman, this way. Many of these loans, not necessarily all, are also sold into the secondary market. And the investors are usually holding those loans are people that, of course, are either commercial banks, they could be private equity firms, and they would have to concur with such a reduction because it affects their purchase. So even though it may be a topic of conversation in an overlay sense, I'm not optimistic that will likely happen. Deferral under the 1112 on the actual 7A 504 loan payments, which of course is covered in the act, was signed on 12/27. Now it's called the 325 action. Deferral of payments for 7A or 504 loans will commence in February. It did not cover January, but that remains probably to be subject to change in the next stimulus package as well. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. And of course, I think, to be straight with everybody, just to note that that's deferral, not forgiveness.
Correct.
Interested in how our congressional delegation can assist with small business, especially the 8A and Native 8A Native Hawaiian organizations with DoD and federal contracting opportunities, which enrich our island community. Completely top of mind for me. We're seeing significant investment by our Department of Defense in Hawaii. That is actually that's actually saved our economy in many, many ways. Of course, our economy has been significantly impacted, but when you consider that our federal government, primarily through our armed services and defense efforts, pre-COVID was accounted for somewhere in the range of 20% of our total economy. And during COVID, that figure has probably gone up to 30 to 40%. It's critical that investment continue here in Hawaii, not to mention the obligation I think we have to our country to facilitate our national defense here. And yet, for all of that investment, we need to make absolutely sure that our businesses here are getting the benefit of that business in construction or in services or in any number of areas. The programs that were referenced in the question, 8A and Native 8A, Super 8A, sometimes referred to or comparable, are programs that try to establish preferences for that businesses with our local small businesses, with their Native Hawaiian small businesses, longstanding programs, and some businesses are able to navigate that system very well, but in my experience, many businesses are either not aware of the opportunities or are not sufficiently versed in how to go about gaining access to federal government contracting. And also the services themselves are inconsistent in terms of their commitment to those programs. So this is a completely separate area that's Actually, I was just talking about it with my staff yesterday about how we go out and conduct our own seminars and facilitate a greater level of connection between our local businesses and our local military services to improve in this area. So it's a point very well taken and unfinished business. Would you also be able to recommend other grants for small businesses who are having a hard time with loans? Any one of the three of you, what opportunities have we not talked about here for our small businesses? Have we focused on PPP, EIDL? We have focused on shuttered venue operators for those eligible there. There are a host of other small business programs that pre-existed COVID-19, and they're still in effect. How do we respond to this question? Are there any obvious areas that you think people just aren't taking full advantage of?
If Kathy or Dana, I will go ahead and on the targeted EIDL advance, the guidance that is being published is dealing with what is considered a low income or what we'll call hub zone like area of the state. We do expect that geo map for people who want to go after a targeted advance, and I'll provide some brief description. If you got an advance from EIDL back in 2020 and it was $1,000, we know that Congress resolved the problem of having that offset against any PPP draw one impact. That was resolved in the legislation of 1227. But assuming that you did not have a PPP loan and you only had an EIDL advance, you can now apply for the difference between 1,000, if that was the one you received, and the 10,000. The only challenge is it now requires a low or moderate income area of the state to be identified. So that hopefully that guidance will be available to us next Tuesday. We do have an Office of Field Operations call on Monday, so I can be able to share that with our resource partners as well as you, Congressman Case, because we want to make sure our communication with the congressionals, particularly with you as the lead in my mind, so you have that information firsthand. Thank you, Congressman.
I just wanted to add, the question before this was on specifically federal contracting. And Dana mentioned it, but the PTAC program has been reestablished here in Hawaii. And that's the Procurement Technical Assistance Program. And it is a DoD program and can help any business navigate through the federal system in order to get contracts or to get on schedules and things like that. So they are HIPTAC.org, Hawaii PTAC, and the director of that program, his name is William Kerr, Kerr, and they work very closely with the SBDC. So if for some reason you can't locate that information, you can call your local SBDC and they'll refer you to the PTAC program.
And I just want to add on to Mark's comment. There is very limited quote unquote grants pre-COVID that are for for-profit companies, but there are some vehicles out there for you. It would depend on the nature of the product or service that you have. What I would just say in a general sense is that if you have a product or service that is innovative, like a life-changing technology, then reach out to us and then we'll talk to you about some of those grant vehicles that might be applicable to you. Again, to add on to Mark Spain's discussion.
Okay. Let's see, question to me here on the Jones Act. I'm going to pass on that just because I think there's other questions directly on the COVID relief. But if you go to my website, I talk extensively about the Jones Act there, and I am happy to help answer your questions separately. let's see, let me just find my place here. Let's see, okay, here we go. Can MBDA support Native Hawaiian-owned 88 companies or only minority-owned small business owned by individuals? I think the bottom line there is, I mean, you lived in this space yourself for quite a while. So are you able to help our NHOAJs? Okay, cool.
Yes, we can. So we actually take care for the procurement as well. So we can start from, it's soup to nuts. So we can help you get registered with the federal government, put together a marketing package for the federal government. If you want to apply as an 8A concern, we can help you put that application together. We can review your 1010C business plan. We get submitted to SBA. We also help with the renewals. We can help you put together how to track contract opportunities onto beta.sam. We can work with the various small business liaisons within the agencies to hopefully get you connected. We also work with SBA and Department of Transportation with the state of Hawaii to do matchmaking events. Pre-COVID, we did a lot of face-to-face 10-minute matchmaking sessions. But since COVID, we've done a virtual platform where SBA, myself, other various agencies within the state of Hawaii, you can meet with an agency representative and talk about planned procurements. You can talk about your products or services. So we help the broad spectrum, whether you are a non-8A Native Hawaiian or an 8A Native Hawaiian owned company that wants to be 8A, or you are a budding nonprofit organization that wants to become an NHO. We can talk you through that process as well. So my answer is yes.
Okay. And Dana's contact information is in the chat room for that question, that second question on that. Let's see. For PPP2 second round, when is the 300 employee threshold determined? Is it based on when the application is filed? Mark, do you have that?
Yes, that's the very first step in the validation process to make sure that the 300 is affirmed in the application. And I would also like to add that if there was any deficiency from draw number 1, a hold code will come forth and affect the issuance of the draw 2 until that's resolved. So at this point, it should be known that the 300 will apply to the draw number 2, but if there's any deficiency or what we call validation codes, hold codes, and 49 of them have been identified by the Office of Capital Access that came from the first loan, it will be a needing solution. And when I send you the PowerPoint that you'll find helpful, the codes are explained in slides 9 through 11.
Okay. And just to be clear, the question was, when is the 300 employee, what date is the 300 employee established? Is that at the application date?
The 300 employees is effective with any application because the legislation dictating same was 12/27/20.
So 300 employees as of 12/27/20?
Correct, for round 2.
Okay. I am a proponent of programs that keep people working and lower costs for businesses as opposed to just cutting and mailing out checks. To that end, PPP has been one of the most impactful programs. I encourage more programs like this as opposed to just mailing out checks. Is this under consideration? I mean, yes, and you know, to be straight with the questioner, there is a real policy disagreement in Washington, D.C. as to what the best programs are. Many people feel differently than you do, that direct payments, or in some cases, you know, income maintenance programs are far broader, have far broader impact than kind of more targeted PPP. I think PPP was very well constructed, and I support PPP. And let's remember that PPP was premised on the idea that businesses receiving this aid would keep people on their payroll. So this wasn't a handout. You had to keep your business going. You had to keep people employed. That had the benefit of not only keeping people employed with healthcare benefits, but also keeping the burden off of the unemployment office. So I'm a supporter of the PPP. I think the answer to your question is that in in trying to deal with the severe emergency of COVID-19, we tried all of the above. And over time, we're going to have to make some more narrow choices. Are there any programs or grants who can assist new businesses and nonprofits started during COVID-19? Well, I think the answer is if you have a new business or a nonprofit during COVID-19, in general, you're still eligible not only for the assistance of the folks on the call, but also for many of these programs. I think the only area that I guess, Mark, occurs to me is some of these programs require a comparison of revenues, like for example, PPP round 2 between 2019 and 2020. So what if you don't have a quarter 2019? Are you then not eligible for a second round of PPP? I forget the details on that.
May I help you? The thing that's important is February 15th in the original CARES Act that was passed in March. February 15th was the date the business had to be operable. What we are doing now is we're asking for our headquarters to tell us, okay, if the business started in January, and we have several, will you kindly tell us if that effective date of February 15th has been complied with? Will there be any comparative alternative to the 2019 data since it doesn't exist? We expect that to come back from Office of Capital Access within the next 2 days, meaning probably Monday.
Okay, so I think the answer to the questioner is we're not sure yet exactly of coverage under PPP in particular, but you should apply anyway, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the lenders know from yesterday's call that gave, which of course is talking about the round 2 issues. We now realize that the February 15th, if the business was started in 2020 January, that's a puka, and we'll deal with it.
Okay. Are there programs and grants specifically tailored for these industries? Number 1, film industry. Number 2, agricultural businesses. Number 3, educational nonprofits. I mean, in general, no. Although all of them, as long as they qualify under the SBA, under the emergency assistance, when you talk about nonprofits, that would be back to the 501c question that we discussed earlier. But certainly, if you qualify as a small business, you should be eligible. And also back to my prior comment that the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program was quite specifically tailored to an industry that is one of many industries that needed some very, amplified help. However, the other thing I would say there, so although there is not specifically tailored comparable stuff for film or agricultural educational per se, at least with agricultural and educational, there are separate CARES Act funds and supplemental funds being provided through separate programs to the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Department of Education, and from them down to the local state ag and state DOE, that you may well be eligible for assistance through those programs. So although they're not tailored within the SBA context, they may well be tailored within some other area. So we can, if you email us, we can see whether we can find any specific connections for you on ag and educational. I think the answer on the film is no. Let's see.
Congressman Case, I can add on to that. I would, for those for the ag related, reach out to, and I just had a virtual with Shirley. Her name is Shirley Heatherly. She's over at the USDA. She's the business program specialist. So her email is shirley.heatherly@usda.gov. So I'll put that in there right as soon as I finish this. So she talks about, and she talks exactly what Congressman Case said, is that there are some vehicles under the USDA program that can be targeted to agricultural related companies. For the educational nonprofits, I would say take a look at grants.gov, and just like any for-profit companies, you want to do search engines for that so that you can see any of those grant options that pop out specifically addressing your nonprofit's goals and objectives. I would say that would be the best bet. For sure, as a federal grant program, you must be a 501c3. So kind of work through that as well. But I would say surely over at USDA is a good place to start for ag-related, and then grants.gov is another place to start for the nonprofits.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, Kathy, I think I'll give you this one. Would you recommend applying for EIDL even though we have already applied and received PPP loans from first and second rounds? I forget whether that's even possible, but do you know the answer to that?
Yeah. Well, they couldn't have done this round yet, so I don't know exactly what they mean there.
Well,
the EIDL.
Let's assume that, let's just take out second round here. Let's just assume that they got a PPP loan the first time around. Can they?
Right.
Can they still apply for EIDL now? And would applying for EIDL prevent them from applying for
Yes.
the second round of PPP?
No, it would not prevent it. The main thing to keep in mind there is that PPP, if you spend the funds correctly, which is 60% towards your maintaining your payroll and maintaining those costs, that part can be for, you know, your whole loan could be forgiven if you follow all the rules. But there's a chance for forgiveness, or a large chance for forgiveness, if you follow the rules on the funding. And EIDL is a loan, and you know, you need to keep in mind that, you know, yes, you can apply for it, but know that it is a loan and that it has different terms and conditions. So be sure to contact one of the resource partners, and they can tell you exactly the differences, the current loan amounts, and those kinds of things. But it's important to understand, and I don't know if Dana wants to add to that or not.
Okay, kind of the endless question, EIDL or PPP. We have been living with that for 1 year. EIDL or PPP, PPP or EIDL.
Yeah, and they can do both. There's no reason they cannot do both.
Okay. Mark, this is just a text message I got from one of our Hawaii Banker Association friends who was on the call, who just comments that the biggest issue for them right now is the cold holds that you referred to earlier, and that is an urgent matter that I think they've already made you aware of, and you're well aware of that.
Yeah. It basically is, it's sort of like a catch-22 situation, Congressman, because we know from the first round, first draw of PPP, we have been working with a number of constituents here locally who say these loans were never done by me, including PPP and EIDL. And in this case, that's why the decision was made in the writing of the legislation. Hey, don't do the validation and forgiveness. The horse is already out of the barn if you're going to go to draw number 2. So we understand that the hold codes are there, and it's going to affect the length of time it takes to get the loan out. And when you see the PowerPoint, you'll see the rationale behind it. It goes to Article 7 of the legislation. And so what we're being asked to do, in fact, the date of 1/27 was stipulated in the legislative. That's when SBA had to respond. There were 2 other dates, as you're probably aware, where we had to have certain details out to the public. So what we hope to do is let the Hawaii Bankers Association contact me. I'll be more than happy to give them the benefit of in-depth information that maybe wasn't picked up on the call that was done by our Office of Capital Access, Diana Seaborn, and also John Miller, that was done on the call yesterday. Thank you, Congressman.
Okay. All right. We are coming up on our appointed hour. I appreciate everybody's attention throughout the call and all the questions. Again, we're gonna send this seminar out so that you can forward it along to other people. I think there's a lot of helpful information. Probably for me, the most helpful part of it is just kind of listening to our three experts here, talking it through and offering to answer your questions. So there's your opportunity. I'm just going to give each of you just a real quick, any last things you want to say or areas that you think we haven't covered. So Dana, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, everybody. So thank you to Congressman Case. Thank you to everybody for participating. Also to Mark and Kathy for being great partners in this effort. Again, feel free to reach out to any of the technical service providers to ask any kind of questions for direction with regards to all of the things that are happening. And they're happening really fast. And this is a fluid situation. I know for a fact that all of us technical service providers are on the phone. Myself, I'm on 2 phone calls, one at 3 a.m. in the morning and one at 11 o'clock a.m. in the morning. And things are fluid and they're changing. So always keep informed. Even though we talked about this today, things might happen that will change what we've said today, tomorrow. So I know Mark is going to roll out some schedules of events, and I'd say when you can, reach out, dial in and see what is the latest update. Other than that, aloha and thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, Dana. Kathy?
Yeah, it wouldn't unmute for some reason. I was just going to say, just to keep in mind the 2 SBA webinars coming up. There's one February 2nd and one February 4th next week. And they'll be certainly addressing the latest in the information that Mark gathers from his Monday call. So for any of you who want to know some more of the details and the qualifying remarks and be able to ask additional specific questions, I would suggest that you go onto the SBA site and look for those webinar sign-ins. Unless Mark, can you provide it today?
Thank you, Kathy. It's most appropriate. I think what we'll do, and I want to thank Dana and Kathy for being on the call collectively. This is the kind of team attitude that we look forward to have, and all of our resource partners have distinct areas where they excel. And I think the other 2 resource partners that I will mention, that's the Women's Business Center at the YWCA, and also our Veteran Business Outreach Center, led by Dennis Kwok, who's also, of course, a part of the UH family of outreach partners. We just thank Congressman Case for the opportunity, and I hope that we have the opportunity to do this again in a town hall session. I really do appreciate it, Congressman. It gives us an opportunity for the SBA family of resources to serve our community even more robustly maybe than has been done in the past. Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, thank you so much again to all 3 of you, to all of the folks that are on the call with us today. Please, we will be sending out further information back to you, including the SBA's slides. You have all the contact information. We'll try to get that together and send that back out to you. And what we ask you to do, if you found this useful, was to forward that information to your circles, forward that information so that we can, magnify the message here. The bottom line is that there's a lot of federal assistance available to our small businesses in a critical time, and there's lots of folks whose commitment is to helping our small businesses through this crisis. Again, my office, case.house.gov, is ready access. If you can't get an answer anywhere else, or if you just want to start with us, that's fine. Let us know and we'll do what we can to put you in touch with the right people. And we'll all get through this together. So with that, I bid you all a fond aloha, and we'll check in again soon. Mahalo.
Semper Fi.